Hi everyone, we're Gabbi,
Karim,
and Jules.
and you're listening to the Making of an Incredible MD podcast by Allied to Health.
last season we took you behind the scenes of some of our mock MMI stations.
So we've talked about the GAMSAT and we've talked about the interviews. So now on to the next step. This season we're talking all things getting ready for med school.
We will be running you through what a day in the life of a medical student looks like, what study techniques to know about, what your career is going to look like, and much more.
So stay tuned and get ready to get med ready.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Today we have the second part of our mini-series all about dealing with disappointment and getting through the marathon of a journey that is GAMSAT, applications, interviews, and so on. Through this mini-series, we hope to help students that are moving from their undergraduate degree into their postgraduate studies or into the workforce by sharing other people's experiences. Today, I am joined by Prav. He started his med application journey right back in year 12 and has sat through the UMAT and the GAMSAT multiple times. So it's been a very long journey, but he is now studying med at the University of Sydney. So he tells us all about his journey and what he has learned along the way and the importance of having a positive mindset. I hope you enjoy this episode and that his story helps some students who may be right in the middle of this difficult journey right now. Enjoy the episode. Hi, Prav. How are you going?
I'm good. How are you, Gabbi?
Good, thank you. Before we get stuck into our episode today, I might just do an acknowledgement of country. So I would like to acknowledge the traditional and rightful owners of the land in which we are both on today, but I personally am on Wiradjuri land. I would like to pay my respect to the elders past, present, and emerging, as well as any First Nations people who may be listening to the podcast today. So thanks for joining us today, Prav. Did you want to start off by telling us a little bit of a background about yourself?
Yeah, no, thank you, Gabbi. Actually, just before I begin, I just want to also extend my respects to, I'm calling in from Gadigal country in the Eora nation. I just wanted to extend my respects to their traditional owners and up-and-coming leaders as well. Thank you, Gabbi. Great to be here on the podcast. So I guess for those listening who don't know who I am, I'm Pravind. I'm a first-year medical student at the University of Sydney. I was one of the first students with the Allied to Health program last year. And I'm now actually a Section 1 tutor. I was recently recruited in, I think, a couple months ago. So I'm looking forward to taking part in that in the second part of this year. Yeah.
Yes. We like to recruit from our own, and you were one of my secretly favorite students. So it's good to have you on the team now.
Oh, thank you.
So did you want to tell us a little bit about maybe your GAMSAT story and sort of your journey into medicine?
Yeah, sure. I guess, I don't want to give you a whole life story of how I got here, but I guess really my medicine story started, I guess I'll go way back into year 12, where I did actually sit what was then the UMAT, now the UCAT for those listening. And I just didn't get a good score and didn't get in that year. So that was sort of like where the journey began and then stopped very rapidly. And then I sort of got into undergrad. I went and did biomed at Monash. And in second year, I then decided to start sitting the GAMSAT. And at that time, I wasn't too sure about whether I wanted to do medicine or not. I had initially wanted to do it when leaving year 12. Then I went into biomed and I was like, maybe medicine's not for me. Maybe I want to do something else in another area. But I thought maybe it was just worth sitting it again and seeing how that goes. So I sat it in September of 2019. And I think we'll talk more about this later on in the podcast, but my scores were sort of a bit all over the place. And I wasn't exactly sure where to go with that. And so I think a couple of fortunate things happened in the sort of 6 to 8 months that preceded me sitting that test and the next one in May 2020. So the first one was that at the end of the year, I really was fortunate enough to take a internship at the public health department that Monash has near the Alfred Hospital. And I think from that, I really sort of realized that this is where my love of medicine, or like why I want to do this, comes from. Just like being able to work with people. And that was like sort of my initial spark again of why I wanted to pursue this career. I guess another thing, and I mean, a lot of people would say this is probably a very unfortunate thing, was that early in January, early in February, we started having the first signs of the pandemic. And I also started working in an aged care facility on that time as well. And I got to see, like, again, the sort of frontline healthcare worker, all the people at the coal face, especially as this sort of pandemic was coming through. I was like, again, sort of resparking my interest in why I want to go into this career. So by that time, I'd already signed up for what was then the March 2020 GAMSAT. I had signed up also to How Out to Health because I was like, okay, I need some help over my previous sort of effort. And then it got delayed. I think it was like March 14th, the Prime Minister came out and said, oh, everything's going to the wall. So that was like a really like messy Friday when they pushed back the GAMSAT by 2 months. But I was also like, cool, this is a great opportunity. I can like reset my mindset. I can really like knuckle down and like bang this out like once and for all. And yeah, so over the next 2 months, I did that. I did more courses with How Out to Health, and then I set the May GAMSAT. And I think we got our scores back in July. And I know it's like I was at work and I got my scores. I was like, oh, this is a good score. I can do something with that kind of thing. Yeah.
Thinking about your mindset then, that is crazy that like that I just reflecting back that did actually happen, that everyone was ready to sit the GAMSAT and then everything got changed. And obviously lots of students, even students outside of medicine, year 12 students and other students ready for important exams had to really, think what's next. But it's great to see your sort of mindset there, that you sort of took it as an opportunity and as a positive to like have an extra 2 months to prepare for the exam essentially. So can you tell us a little bit more about that, like your mindset maybe during your first GAMSAT and your second GAMSAT, and how that sort of shifted, especially when you got your marks?
Yeah. I guess sort of so going into the first GAMSAT, I think I didn't take it too seriously at the time. I think there may have been a combination of factors in that. I don't know if any second years are out there, but the sort of the idea of like thinking about what you're gonna do after your degree as a second year, especially in the middle of second year, you don't really think about it too much. So and at that time I wasn't too sold on whether I wanted to do med or wanted to like do an honors or do a research project or do something and then sort of try to get into med at a later stage. So I didn't take it too seriously. I did do like a bit of preparation, like a couple of like paper practice exams, sort of to myself. I didn't do any courses or anything like that. And I just thought, okay, I'll do this GAMSAT, see how I go sort of on my own, but sort of maybe not the greatest mindset, honestly, to go in with. At the time, yeah, so that was sort of my mindset going into that one. I think immediately after I got my scores, so my scores on their own were not that bad. They were like, I think they were like, they're not that bad on their own. But what I had just come off like a really rough semester in semester one of that year. So I knew that with my GPA, that score would not actually work. So in a weird converse way, I didn't actually think too much about the GAMSAT after I got my score in September. What my main focus was like, okay, I got a score. It's all right on its own. So I know I can do the GAMSAT all right-ish, but I really need to fix my GPA. I need to like really smash out the next like 3 semesters of my degree, because like a good GAMSAT score is not going to be nothing without a good GPA. So my actual real focus was like, okay, now let's work hard on my degree and actually, not get that score up. So I think I did that all right. And I think a lot of the strategies that came from that sort of shift in mental health towards my degree also flowed into my preparation for GAMSAT. So a lot of self-reflection, a lot of changing my learning methods and all that kind of stuff. I think the key change going in to the second GAMSAT was that I was like, okay, well, I do want some help with this, some outside help, and some additional resources, which is sort of where I stumbled across How Out to Health in sort of January 2020. Yeah, I think that's sort of like how I went about my first GAMSAT. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea of sort of talking about your mind shift in terms of how to seek help, because I think a lot of students sit the GAMSAT the first time as just like let's see how this goes, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but it seems to be the trend. And then you sort of realized actually maybe I can get some help here, and maybe that's the way to go, which I think can be hard for a lot of people to admit that they need help. But in something like the GAMSAT, I would argue that everyone needs help because it's really hard to do on your own. And maybe you can talk more about that, like how you sort of learnt and what you learnt and how you turned this experience into a learning experience.
Yeah. I guess so. I guess like I said, during the first GAMSAT, I sort of realized that sort of all my three sections, I think I was weakest mostly in sections 1 and 2. And I was like all right in section 3, so borderline in section 3. So I was like, okay, well, what I really want to focus on is on section 1 and section 2, heading into the March 2022 training GAMSAT. As obviously as a biomedical student, I'm sure a lot of biomedical students can relate to this. Like, you probably haven't touched like essay writing or like any of those sort of like more, I guess, like literature or anything in a while. When you go to the GAMSAT, because again, you're doing a science subject. So I was like, okay, well, I want to sort of focus on that area. So that's why when the opportunity came out, and I remember like, I think How the Health, like they didn't have a full GAMSAT program when they started. It was actually just a section 2. Was it a section? No, it was a section 1. It was a section 1, like, what you call it, crash course. I was like, okay, we'll do that for a couple of weeks and see how that goes. So that was sort of the help I received. The other thing that helped me was also seeking out things like practice exams. I knew from the previous semester and as well from just my time in university in general that I tend to respond better to practice exams and practice questions than learning sort of content, especially for a certain test, learning content and then trying to apply it to a test. So I knew trying to seek out sort of like practice exams and practice tests would be my sort of best strategy for trying to maximize my score heading into March 2020. But I think the thing that changed, like especially when I got that help, was that I didn't realize how nuanced the GAMSAT was. I think like I sort of had set the test once and it's like, oh cool, there's all these questions, but I didn't know it was like, oh, you could split it actually down into different sections, right? There's different ways of writing a GAMSAT question, for instance, or there's a certain way of expecting. I think or there's like given the standards that ASO expects for section 2, there's like a certain way of doing essays or what they sort of like want you to do, but even though it's not explicitly said, I think having those sort of like small tricks from doing those initial early courses really helped in my preparation and sort of more focusing it into heading into March 2020.
Yeah, I think that's a really good learning tool. And that's what we try to teach our students as well, like to break it up so it's more manageable. But a lot of students really do struggle with this sort of long marathon type GAMSAT situation, which it seems like you went through that situation as well, going through the GAMSAT twice and then it being delayed. So like it was even longer journey. And then there's the application process, the interviews, it's so long. How do you sort of maintain this positive energy throughout the entire time?
Oh, that's a good question. Man, that's a tough one. I think the first thing I did was like, I think always a good thing to remember is sort of like once you do something. So when I did the GAMSAT initially in like September 2019, I didn't think about it too much afterwards. I threw myself into other areas. I think if you're going in for this long journey, and yeah, applying for med is a multi-year long journey for some people. You really need to be doing other stuff besides that, just to sort of take your mind off it. I mean, that could be your degree, but I feel like, especially if you're a med sci person or some kind of biomed science, then it's really hard to escape that. So doing something else, like having other hobbies and things like that, sort of pad you through the time, is a good way of sort of keeping your positive energy up. I think 2020 was obviously much harder because suddenly you're now, none of that sort of exists, and you're trapped. You're sort of trapped indoors. But I think the important thing is to just keep open your possibilities. I think, I almost think of it as like, it's a weird acronym, like Schrodinger's test score. It's like, until you get your results, you could be really anything. And so just to keep your options open and keep exploring in those, like sort of long stretches of long stages. But I think it is important to remember that for like students listening, that this is a long process. It's sort of a marathon. So don't try to do everything and pace yourself throughout the year. I think that's an important part. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like I said, I just sort of found comfort in doing other stuff besides just GAMSAT and med applications. Last year was chaotic enough, so I was lucky enough to like be a member of member of clubs that was still operating online and debating, and just throwing myself into extracurricular activities where or work where when there was sort of this long dead periods between applications and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to go about it. Remember your life outside of med and GAMSAT is really
Applies to medicine as well because medicine can be all consuming and you definitely
important.
need stuff outside of medicine or it might it might get to you eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good to put those practices in before you get into medicine. So then once you're in, it's easy. And that really ties into the next question, the last one, all about the practical tips. So if you could go back, talk to yourself who was going through all of this GAMSAT process, what tips would you give yourself or people in similar situations?
Cool. Yeah, I think so my first tip I guess would be like don't neglect like any section of the GAMSAT. They're all equally important. They're all equally important. I think there's often a misconception, even when I was talking to some of because in Sydney, I've met some undergrads who are also applying for med. So that's going through the recent cycle. Sometimes there's a lot of misnomers like, oh, section 3 is the most important section. You can sort of neglect the other sections. Like, don't neglect any section. Like, any section could be your savior. For me, it was section 2, which was noticeably higher than all my other 2 sections, and obviously dragged my score up to like a sort of an acceptable level. Um, I think also another important thing is just to do a self-reflection at some point. So, and this is for anything. So this is whether it's the GAMSAT or even just how you're doing in your degree at the moment. I think it's always important to sit down and see like, okay, where am I at now? Where do I want to be? How do I get there? Because if I had not done that, I don't think A, I wouldn't have not improved my GAMSAT score, and B, I probably wouldn't have tried to fix those sort of glaring problems in the way I did my degree, in which and I wouldn't have gotten the GPA and needed to get into medicine in the sort of later stages of 2019, 2020. So I think always doing a self-reflection is always a good strategy. And there's definitely lots of resources out there to help you with that. I think the final one is just take a break. I think, again, it's very easy the sort of thing, okay, I got my GAMSAT score. Let's start throwing ourselves into the next one. I was like, well, hold up, Speed Racer. Let's let's take a break first. Let's do something else, and then come back to it, in the holidays. So I guess was the September one, you've got your mid-year break coming up. So that's always a good stage, good place, I think, to start out at. Because I think if you don't take a break and step away, again, you don't really have that time for self-reflection, but also you're just going to burn yourself out eventually. And the last thing you want to do is like be hating the GAMSAT and be hating the whole med application process before you even get into medicine or get to the interviews, for instance, because it sort of drains on you mentally. So always take a break, whether it's just like doing something else, focusing on your degree, doing extracurricular activities after a GAMSAT, do it for a bit, and then come back when you have a good convenient time, come back to the GAMSAT prep for the next step, rinse and repeat that way, I think, and pace yourself. I think that's my favorite tips, what I've given to myself. My other one would be, I mean, this is a bit of a one to like for applicants who are applying for universities. Do research into your university and your program. Don't be like me who just sort of like applied for University of Sydney 6 hours before the closing deadline and then didn't research the implications of like moving into state and all that. Not that I hate it or anything. I love University of Sydney, but it does help if you know exactly what you're applying for, and exactly like where you want to go, and if you are applying in the state, like having a consideration of how you're going to do it as well. So yeah, I think that's just another tip to myself. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All of those things take time as well, like researching the universities and researching the different states and places. Like I applied for some universities and I'd never been to those cities before. So that all of that stuff takes time. So allowing yourself enough time. But I think you really hit the nail on the head there by saying, take a break and don't go too hard on yourself, especially because, these episodes are designed for students who may have received marks in the past that they weren't happy with, or maybe have received emails from university that haven't been good news. So it's all about taking a break, yes, reflecting, and yes, thinking about the next steps, but also don't be hard on yourself. It's a really, really long journey, and this is hard. Both you and myself, Prav, did the GAMSAT twice, and it's just that feeling of uncertainty after the first GAMSAT. I think that you are sort of like, oh, can I do this? Can I not? But you need to just back yourself, take a break, and give yourself a break, because you're doing a really good job. And look at you now, first year meds, you're on the trajectory upwards. We still both have a few years to go of our study life, but our careers are well under the way, so we should be proud of ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Again, it's like I said, it's a marathon, not a race. It's definitely like, I definitely understand like the uncertainty about the future. It can be a very scary, like, I wouldn't call it the void, but maybe the void of like uncertainty. And I think, I mean, at some part of me says like you should embrace like that uncertainty, but somebody's like, just don't let it get to you as well. I think, what for those listening, those applying, what you want to do. You want to do medicine. You will definitely get there at some point. So I think just, keeping focused on that track. But I think also just remembering it sometimes gets lost in the in sort of the whole process, is like why exactly you want to do medicine. That's often a very good driving force as well. Don't lose like why you want to do this career as well. I think keeping that in the sort of review in the dashboard is always a good motivator for especially during these trying times. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a really good reminder. And I think that finishes our podcast episode quite nicely. So thank you very much for joining me today, Prav. I hope the listeners found your experience, helpful and interesting for them, and hopefully a little bit of motivation to tell them keep going, because you're on the right track.
Yeah, thank you, Gabby. Thank you for having me on. And I'm wishing all the applicants and candidates out there all the best of luck in the coming months.
Great. Yes. Good luck, everyone. Thank you, Prav. Thank you for listening to the Making of an Incredible MD podcast by Allied to Health. Please like, share, and subscribe to help spread the word about our podcast. And we'd love to hear your feedback. So send us an email or message on Facebook. All of our links are in the show notes. Thanks. We'll see you next time.